Behind the Mirror of Music with Dannii Cohen.
Hello, and welcome to Behind the Mirror of Music. My name is Dannii Cohen. This week's guest is Meg Bussert. Meg Bussert was nominated for a Tony Award for her role as Fiona in the revival of Brigadoon, starred as Queen Guinevere opposite Richard Harris in Camelot, as Marian Paroo opposite Dick Van Dyke in a revival of The Music Man, and created the role of Carlotta in Maury Yeston's and Arthur Kopit's Phantom, among countless other credits on her decades-long Broadway CV. I hope you will enjoy the show.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Well, this took a while. How are you?
I'm good. Hope you too.
I'm okay. I'm good. Yes.
What are you doing right now?
Right now in my life, I'm enjoying some retirement and being a grandmother. I have a few little grandkids and one on the way. And I'm working with some high school kids and some elders, doing some teaching and what we would call oral interpretation. Readings of plays and other things. Just getting up and I don't know. I'm having a blast doing it because I don't have to worry about teaching a curriculum. A designed curriculum, and you don't have to do all that administrative work that you have to do in college when you're teaching. And I don't have the energy to do 8 shows a week anymore. So that's I can do occasional things. I still sing a lot, and kind of, but when I want to, and what I want to do it for. So it's I'm not tied to having to have the next job. Where are you located right now? Where are you?
I'm in the Netherlands right now.
You're in where? The Netherlands. Ah, okay. Okay.
So it's a really international project.
Yeah. I did some work in Fredericia for the Royal Danish Academy of Musical Theater several years ago. I did a residency there and taught. For a little bit. Yeah, I do. Do you know the Michael Chekhov work, acting work? Have you run into that at all? Michael Chekhov was the nephew of Anton Chekhov,
Yes.
During Stanislavski times, 100 some years ago. But he was he left Russia and then went around Europe and then ended up in the United States. But he taught a special acting program, kind of Stanislavski, but it was much more, what would you say, physical, creative, and it works really, really well for singing actors. So I sort of specialized in that training, and I did a lot of workshops around the world while I was doing teaching. So
wonderful that you are teaching this, because I heard not many people use it anymore, and it's a really good way to act.
Well, it's in history, Stanislavski was the one who kind of moved us into psychological acting of the 20th century. So a lot of the other approaches, which are quite wonderful, kind of are based on Stanislavski, and then they go off and do their own thing on it, But the Stanislavski method was limiting in a lot of ways because it used so much of your own experience, whereas some of the other approaches, and Michael Chekhov was one of them, is the approach is your art is larger than yourself. So you can play characters that have nothing to do with you, right? If you can imagine them. So if you've got a good imagination,
Yes.
you can play many, many more things than if they just said, Meg, we want you to play a murderer. Well, okay, how do I do that? But if I got a good imagination, then I can figure out things, So anyway, it's a lot of fun. Singers and dancers have particular problems when they're acting because they are also doing something else. They have to worry about their breath. They have to worry about the notes they're going to hit. And the dancer is worried about the body positioning and all of this stuff. So there's a lot of other things that are going on in their heads and their hearts. And so sometimes how to, sometimes an elite singer doesn't feel as though they're really acting. They might be singing brilliantly, but they don't feel like they're acting. And so my job was to kind of relax them and tell them, you're acting fine. You're acting fine. If you're doing the music properly and you have an understanding of the character, you're acting. So
How did you fall in love with music and art?
I'm the oldest of 7 children, grew up in the Midwest around the Chicago area, the middle, the middle of the US. And we sang. We made a lot of noise, and we just grew up singing. And as I went through middle school and high school, they kept telling me, you're good. You have a good voice. And I go, okay. I was singing along with all the records, back in the days when we had the vinyl records, and I sang with Julie Andrews, and I sang with Barbara Cook, and I sang all of those, marvelous shows of, growing up in the 50s and 60s. I sang the shows of the 30s and 40s because my father had those recordings. And I did a lot of plays in high school, and I always got a big role. So I guess I was good. And then when I started college, they didn't have programs like acting programs as many as they do today. So I went to college in the late 60s, early 70s. And, you could study theater to teach theater, but you couldn't. Now where I went to school, they didn't have a program to teach you how to act. So I took an education course, and every semester I changed my major because nothing really suited what I wanted to do. I did a lot of plays in college, anything that was plays and musicals all the time. So I did that for about 4 years and got no degree. And then went off to New York to be Julie Andrews. That's essentially what I wanted to be. I could sing all of her shows, so why shouldn't I be Julie Andrews? And I started booking. I started getting parts. Now, actually, I was started actually in the chorus when I got my equity card and I was a professional. Then I was hired to sing in some very big Broadway shows of the time. And then I was recognized within the company to possibly understudy. So I was, always being read for little roles in the shows, and then eventually getting the understudy roles, and then eventually going on. And then I started, I got an agent, and I started booking parts myself. Initially, they were not in New York, they were like around the country in regional shows, but that was fine. And then I started booking in New York. So that's a truncated version of what I started in the chorus. I studied, I took a lot of acting classes and dance classes while I was working because I didn't have that training. So I got the training on the job, and I got the training in New York. So I had excellent teachers. And yeah, and then I started booking bigger roles. And the shows that I did primarily were the things I grew up singing. The revivals of South Pacific, or Irene, or Brigadoon, or Camelot, all of those shows that I had grown up, just singing with the recording. And now I was playing the leading lady opposite some pretty major stars at the time. So that was great. And then I started aging out of my category. I was becoming they call an aging ingenue. And they wouldn't let me move into the next category. You are kind of typed in the theater. You know this yourself. They type you. They decide what things you can play, even if you can play many, many different things. And so I was 40 years old or so, and although I looked young, I sounded young, they knew I wasn't. And so they wouldn't let me. The casting people honestly wouldn't let me move into some of the other roles. So in my 40s, I went back to school. I finished college. I went on and got a degree in education, in theater education. No, actually, it was language arts, because I thought I was going to teach high school. So it was going to be drama and novels and all sorts of literature. I was going to direct the high school plays. And I did that for about 2 years, and then got a job at NYU, so a full-time job, and that was perfect. I was working with young people who wanted to do theater in the music department at Steinhardt, and I was teaching them acting. and then I got to direct there, and it was wonderful. Did that for almost 19 years, and still continued to perform. But then I was doing Mother Abbesses all over the place, so that was my role. So that was, you know, it was terrific. It was a terrific combination of both knowing something, doing it well, and being able to share it and help young people. There's just nothing like, as an older artist, there's nothing like working with younger artists. It's fantastic.
Do you feel the style of musical theater has changed a lot from when you started to how it's now?
It evolved, absolutely, absolutely, because, but it, you know, I taught the history of musical theater a little bit too while I was there, and I was amazed at the community of writers. They all knew each other in the 20th century. You know, Hammerstein trained Sondheim, who trained, you know, who was a big influence on Lin-Manuel Miranda. You know, so there's and that's just one connection. There's many, many, many more connections, and it's a very difficult life, but it's a very warm group of people who are doing it, who I would call the creative teams, you know, who are building it. And I'm just delighted with some of the things that are coming forward now. It is different. The storytelling is different. The delivery system is now changing. Over COVID, we learned now that people they're not coming back to seeing shows the way they were before. So we might not have these long runs, these 20-year runs on Broadway. They might be much, much shorter, but they're going to capture them like they did with Hamilton. You know, they're going to put the show from the stage on a streaming platform, and you'll be able to see the actual show. You won't necessarily be seeing a modification, a movie of the show. And I think that's brilliant. They did a few of that. The Camelot that I did was captured that way. There's a Sweeney Todd that was captured, you know, filming it from the stage and then putting it on, at the time, television. And now we've got these streaming things. But there's something very special about capturing what the original people were doing. It changes. If you know, want to put on a revival today of Oklahoma or whatever, they start changing it. You know, they start putting different focuses on different areas, and you either love it or hate it. You know, it doesn't, but if they're going to write something brand new, then it usually has a marvelous combination of what they did 50, 60 years ago and how to deliver it today. And I think that's very exciting. I'm very proud of what musical theater has done and the changes.
You mentioned Camelot. What was it like working on the show?
It was hard because it was such a well-known piece, and we did I came in as the replacement. It was out with Richard Burton, and Richard Harris then went in. It played New York, and then it toured for about a year, I think. And then Richard Harris went in to replace Richard Burton, who was leaving, and I was brought in to be his Guinevere. And Richard had not been on the stage for 20 years at that point. He had started on the stage as a stage actor, and then he went off and did a lot of film, and he hadn't been back. And he had also done the film of Camelot. So yes, this was his first experience in doing the play, the musical version, which is really different than the film. It's even a different story. In the film, Lancelot and Guinevere get together. They actually get together. In the musical, they don't. They may want to get together, but they don't culminate their desires. It doesn't happen. So there's a tragedy involved. She decides in the musical, she's actually in the process of saying, no, Lancelot, we can't do this because we can't. She's, you know, I can't do this. We can't do this. While they're in the process of denying themselves, that's when they get caught together. So that's so everyone is in the triangle is caught in the desire, but not in the actual action of it. So it's a very different thing. So anyway, Richard had he said many times it's a very different role. You know, initially he thought he was going to come in and do basically what he had done in the film, and it wasn't going to work because it was a different piece. So he had a lot of adjusting to do. And, he's a big major star. I was a little scared of him. So, but the story is, and it doesn't flow. The old version of it doesn't flow as well as some of the other shows that Lerner and Lowe wrote. Like Brigadoon flows really well, and all the the Rodgers and Hammerstein South Pacific really is a very important piece of theater. Rodgers and Hammerstein. So it was a hard show, but I learned a lot. I learned so much, and that was I think my fourth Lerner and Lowe piece, and I did get to know Alan J. Lerner pretty well, and it was kind of wonderful. He liked my work, and that was nice. It was very nice. And in fact, I got my first equity job. I got my card on one of the few Lerner and Lowe flops. It wasn't Lerner and Lowe. It was Alan J. Lerner and John Barry. It was a musical version of Lolita, My Love. Don't know if you've ever read Lolita Nabokov's book. It's a story about an older gentleman and a 13-year-old girl having a relationship. So somebody decided to do a musical of it, and Alan wrote the lyrics and worked on the book. John Barry wrote the music. It was a big, horrible bomb. It did not do well. We rehearsed in New York. We went to Boston. We went to New Haven, I think. It was a couple of places, but yeah, it wasn't never opened in New York. So that was my first experience with Alan J. Lerner. And then Brigadoon was a wonderful experience. And he wasn't involved in the show so much, but he was around. He was around. And then when the Camelot happened, that was another. I loved Alan Lerner's work because he loves words. He was a brilliant lyricist as well as a librettist, and what he did with words in most of his shows are just kind of brilliant. And so singing his lyrics was always very exciting to me. The Camelot has great lyrics for Guinevere. Simple Joys of Maidhood is a brilliant, hysterical, wonderful piece. It just
I recently watched it. I recently watched the HBO recording again. It's still really good and still holds up.
Yeah, it does. It does. It's a good story. It's a really, really good story. And, I think it has a lot. A really good story will resonate in different times.
I think the mistake with the recent revival was trying to modernize it while it's set in the time that never needs modernizing.
Yeah, I think that's a good point there. There sometimes today when they want to do an older piece, there's this thought about we will improve it, we will make it better, and then that's tricky. I'm not a writer, I'm a doer of other people's writings, so I think it's very tricky. And then also you're dealing with people who know the show from before. It's difficult for them to accept a whole new perspective on the piece. Yeah, I did see that revival, and it was confusing a little bit because yeah. And of course, for me, it was very hard because why are they doing that? Because I lived with Camelot for a couple of years of my life, so it was like, there are things you can change, but it's hard. It's a very difficult thing to do. But then again, you get something like, Hamilton, which I think is brilliant, taking an idea, taking, contemporary sounding music and telling an old story or an old take on a historical event, and then of course casting it in an impossible way, and it's brilliant because I don't know. I just again, Lin-Manuel Miranda does things with words. He's just so clever, and using the now music to tell a story about way back when, and it worked. really, really well. Mean Girls, there's the Six, about the six wives of, Henry VIII. Those are fun, wonderful things. I think the writing is really good today in a lot of the newer things. I really, really have fun kind to see them. So, and then of course, you guys are dealing with translations, which I think are so much fun. I was a founding member of the Musical Theater Educators Alliance while I was at NYU, and it's an organization of programs that train for the stage, acting, musicals, playwriting, songwriting, and they're all from all over the country. So, and some of them are housed in universities and colleges, and some of them are standalone theater schools. And so we would get together once a year with all of these people, and it was truly marvelous. We had one conference in Gutenberg, and they brought in several translators who were translating American shows into whatever language they were working on. And they, the translators, who were very, very facile and comfortable with English or American, and then they had to, they knew a lot of the cultural references. And some of them don't translate. You have a joke or you have a reference in England or America, and it won't translate in Switzerland. So what can they do? And one of the stories they were telling was, I think it was Avenue Q, Avenue Q with the puppets. Yes. So they're trying to, and they did a wonderful version apparently, but there was a joke that was a Sesame Street joke, and it didn't translate because the end of it was a one-night stand. They had to build up with the 5 pictures of, the little table that stands by your bed. It's a nightstand. We call that a nightstand, but a one-night stand is something else.
Yes,
America. It's 2 folks getting together just for one night, and so that took on a whole nother sexual connotation, which you wouldn't have on Sesame Street. So they had to figure out a whole new joke that the Swiss would understand a little bit better. And when they found the joke, they had to call the writers and say, can we change it? Can we totally change this piece? And the writers went, oh yeah. They didn't want anything that wasn't going to be understood. So I have such respect for folks in any country that are translating these pieces of art, these musicals especially, so complicated. And I don't know, I'm thrilled with, that was an eye-opening experience to really get to chat with, I don't know how you translate something like Hamilton. I mean, how do you translate something like, Gilbert and Sullivan? I mean, all the jokes are kind of centered around the country, and all of those talking words, so many words. It's just an astounding thing. Wonderful.
I think, most people say that the most difficult artist to translate is Sondheim because of the twist and turns the lyrics.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Absolutely. And I think, Lin-Manuel Miranda's stuff is very similar to that, and Sondheim was someone he talked to all the time.
Yes.
In his work. So yes, it's very, very complicated. And I think it's wonderful when it is done. Yeah, he's pretty hard. He's also, when I was coming up in the theater, they often would tell us not to sing Sondheim for an audition because it was also hard to play the music, and not every accompanist could play the intricacies of playing for you unless you brought your own accompanist. So yeah, he's a pretty special guy. Was great work, really.
What was it like to originate the role of Carlotta in Phantom?
That was a hoot. I didn't originate it because it had been around regionally for a little bit, and they knew that they couldn't bring it into New York because Andrew Lloyd Webber's Phantom was there, and New York couldn't take 2 Phantoms. So there was a theater just outside New York. It's a dinner theater called Westchester Broadway Theater, And Maury Yeston really wanted to do the show close to New York, as close as he could. So they made an arrangement, and they had a company going, and for some reason their Carlotta wasn't working out or something. But I had done a lot of work at this theater, and I knew Maury Yeston because I had done a small video series that he helped me with, and he also was a really strong advocate for my going into teaching at a college. I mean, I spoke with him because he was teaching at Yale at the time. So anyway, I had a nice, kind of friendly relationship with him. And then the producers called me and they said, I was down in at Disney World doing a program for the animators, the people who did all the Disney things back in the days when they would do all the drawings. And I was working with some of the characters down there on gestures, because that's one of the things that I kind of specialized in for singers. And I was down there working with other performers in Disney World, and I got this call, would you come up and do Carlotta? I knew a little bit about it. I had seen the production, and I said, yeah, but I would love to. And then I went and auditioned, got it. And then, I spoke with Maury and I said, I've got a kind of another idea about this crazy woman. And so we talked about it. And my idea was that she, Carlotta, of course, she married the manager so that she could star in all the operas. But the idea was that at one time when she was a young woman, she had probably an okay voice, but she had rotten teachers and she had an enormous ego. And so her singing technique was horrible. So she would sing well, but then, like Florence Foster Jenkins, not quite hit the pitch or something. So she was a diva with really bad singing technique. And I thought that was humorous. And then when I did the aria, we raised it so that I could hit a high C at the end, because in those days I had a lot of high Cs. I wanted to sing it well, but with all the bad technique things. So like sliding and making your voice, that kind of cracking. Yeah. So I did everything my voice teachers when I was young told me not to do, and then at the end come up with the big high C. So that was a hoot and a half. And the company was great. Robert Cuccioli played the Phantom when we did it at Westchester Broadway. And then Maury knew that he wasn't going to be able to have a Broadway company, he and Arthur Kopit. And so they decided they wanted to record it. So they took the company mostly from Westchester Broadway, but they brought in Glory Cramden, who was wonderful. She had done the first showing there, but then another young woman came in, to sing that role. But they wanted Richard White, who had done it, because the original production was actually done in the Houston Opera. And that was Richard White and Glory Cramden and another woman playing Carlotta with a different take. So anyway, it worked out terrific for me. And it was just so much fun playing it. It was the only time in my life I got to be the bad guy. And she gets Carlotta in the Yeston Kopit production. She gets to poison the soprano. So she makes this concoction that, when she drinks it, she can't sing, but you get to do it right in front of the audience. You create the thing and then, you give it to her. And then the Phantom gets really pissed off and knows exactly what Carlotta has done. So he kills her on stage. So, and they did it with, at the time that the Phantom would have taken place, they were just starting to, if I'm right about that, to explore the idea of electricity on the stage, having lights, the floor lights, and I don't know. So they decided that this opera house, the Paris Opera House, had electricity. So the Phantom murdered Carlotta as she was in her nightgown running away from her backstage going up these stairs, and he had it rigged so that when he put the electric stuff, she would get electrocuted. And they had Christmas tree lights in my wig, and I had this huge wig, And so the lights would go, I had a little thing and so all these lights went on in my head and I was like shaking. It was just very, very silly and fun. So I got to be the bad guy, I got to poison the soprano, and I got to die right on stage, so it was really an over the top, marvelous, marvelous thing for a somewhat good singer to get to sound bad. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And it's a very different, I know you have a strong background in Phantom.
Yes.
It's a different story than Andrew Lloyd Webber's story. It's a different character. So I think they're both extremely valid storylines, but they are different. And the characters are different. The Carlotta in Maury Yeston is very different from Carlotta in Phantom of the Opera. Phantom is very different. The characters are different. The essential story is the same, but they're, the perspective again is slightly different. Again, it's another one of those great stories, so it can handle, I think, different interpretations. So
There have been many Phantom musicals over the years, but
yeah, Ken Hill.
yes.
Yes. In fact, that's what there were three, in the 80s, there were three Phantoms running around,
Yes.
And like everybody was writing a Phantom. And so it was, yeah. And I always thought it was so fascinating that they all hit at the same time. It was like, what are these guys doing? Everybody's sitting in their apartments or their little houses and let's do Phantom. Let's make it a musical. And all of a sudden, three good writers, all of a sudden there's three productions, totally different takes.
There was even one in the 70s from Ivan Jacobs, but that one disappeared, although it was really good music.
Really? I didn't know
Yes.
this one. Wow.
No, I think it didn't because it didn't hit because at the time Phantom slit someone's throat, and it wasn't. People thought they couldn't do that on stage. Although, yes, but 2 years later, Sweeney Todd arrived, and then everyone.
Yeah, I tell you. So what's appropriate on stage changes with the times too.
Yes.
So that's very interesting. I don't know. But so what else? I mean, I think I'm fascinated with your story. You starting out wanting to be on the stage, and you've done so many other things, which is really remarkable.
Yeah, I always wanted to act and perform, but also always been a writer.
Mm-hmm.
And I started off working doing theater, small time things and stuff. But by the time I was close to breaking through, I got mental health issues, so it never worked out.
Yeah. It's a very hard life. And I noticed when I was teaching at NYU with my students, and their parents would be very concerned about spending the money for the education and what are they going to do. Not everybody makes it, and there are not enough jobs, all that kind of thing. But what I found is creative people are creative people, and they may be drawn to one form of expression, whatever that might be. But if that doesn't work out for them, they are creative, and they can take all of that energy and that ability to improvise, shall we say, into another area. And I mean, you did that, I did that, if I wasn't going to be able to raise my kids and make the money, and the performing, I had many other interests that were pulling me. It wasn't that all of a sudden I'm going to teach. I was always interested in teaching, and that actually was a gift. It allowed me opportunity to kind of stay back a little bit, to go back to school, to kind of retrain, and then to begin working with younger people in a very different way, and helping them with some of the issues I had to contend with, and preparing them to deal with some of the issues I had to contend with. And it's not a bad thing to recognize that you're an artist and to be drawn into it and called to it. But if it doesn't work out, if your first plan doesn't work out, there are other ways that you can harness that that need to express. It can be expressed in different ways, I think. And I'm very proud of a lot of my students who've really gone off and done remarkable things in other fields using that ability to get up and communicate with people. Some of them have become lawyers. Some of them have become marketing people at different companies and helping people to sell products, not as an acting thing, but just being able to present because they understood how an audience works.
Yes.
So they understood what people want from entertainment or from a product, or not everybody has to be an actor, but everybody needs to communicate. And there are wonderful acting tools that anyone can do if they know that it's a tool. I'm nervous. I've got to talk in front of these people. Oh, what am I going to do? How am I going to... Well, I know how to prepare, and I know how to stand up, and I can practice. I know how to do that. So that person has a little more confidence. And that's what I'm teaching now is the tools that can help young people have more confidence when they are having to communicate, a little bit more than what we're doing now. We're pretending we're in the same room and we're having a conversation, but if you're working with someone that has an issue or a problem or a challenge, they still have to communicate. And there's ways of helping them communicate, not changing their minds or making them, come over to your way of thinking, but just helping them express themselves.
Great thing to teach because, most people have issues with communicating or a fear of public speaking and all that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. And I know, I'm sure you do too, a lot of very creative people who are really very shy, kind of quiet. People
Yes.
assume that if you're in the arts that you're an extrovert, you're out there all the time, and that's not a problem for you, and that's not the case at all. So I think but actors do know how to take on another persona. They know how to do that, and if in their own life, if they get things get complicated, sometimes they just start acting kind of get through that problem because they know how to do it. So there's certain skills that aren't just certain skills that can help someone listen and help someone connect with another person. And I think we need to be teaching more of those skills.
I think it's a shame that schools don't have budget or just don't want to do theater or music anymore because they don't think it's necessary, even though it helps with development.
It is. When I was coming up in high school, if you weren't in the sports, if you weren't a jock, an athlete, you were in the theater. Why? Because everybody could find something to do. If you did a play, you could run the lights, maybe. You could be on the crew. You could build the set. It got everybody busy after school. And it wasn't just the kids that were always acting. It was like everybody. It was a wonderful community with a lot of different skill sets or no skills at all, and they would learn one, and responsibility and coming together and being a company effort to put something on. When you're an athlete, it's a gift, but you have to do it. It's very, very, it's discipline, it's organized, but you have to be able to play whatever the sport is, and in theater, especially in educational theater, it's not so insular. It's a little more embracing of everybody, and that's what good education arts teachers do. The same with studio art or dance or anything. You can get kids coming together and expressing in different ways. I totally agree with you. It's just horrible that that's the first thing they decide to cut is the arts teacher. You know, that's silly.
It was the same during COVID when they said talked about art not being a necessary skill and all that sort of thing. It was really always government's always down on artists sooner than anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's you know, that's kind of, I don't know how we change that. That's kind of always been there, and I think it's
True.
always going to be there. And right now, teachers in the United States or drama teachers are having difficulty deciding what shows to do because right now, you know, everyone's arguing about whether it's appropriate, what's appropriate now, you know, so that's kind of,
true.
we're in the middle of a little bit of a awkward time, you know, so yeah, and what books can the kids read and not read, and it's a little complicated, but I mean, theater, art in general, I think has always been a little on the edge because artists see things. They do have a vision, you know, they have something they want to say, and it isn't always the most popular thing, which is probably why you and I like it, but
Yes.
I don't
I
know.
think the silly thing with the book and whether or not you can still see an old show is that I think that a lot of people are placing too much emphasis on thinking about how things are now when they're seeing things of the past.
Well, and it's when I was working with my, you know, 20-year-old students and I would bring up an old show, they would like roll their eyes, you know, and then once we get into the show and they could see what the themes were, they were like, whoa, I had no idea. You know, they just listened to the music and yeah, the story about, you know, this cowboy and this other guy and the girl, and you know, and then you start getting into the actual biases and difficulties of the times, and there's a lot riding underneath all of that, and some very good writers of the old shows, and to teach young people to appreciate. I think it's listening or watching in a new way. You know, it's natural for young people to dismiss what their parents did. That's natural. And what their grandparents did, oh Lord, you know, forget that. But then as they age and they live life and, you know, things do repeat themselves. They may have a different outfit on, but things do repeat themselves. And then you begin to notice that and begin an appreciation for some of the older things, you know, and understanding. I think to study history or to study art within history is a must because the art didn't just happen. The art came out of something that was going on at the time with the people. And the artist had to say something about that and did so with whatever the art expression was, whatever they were allowed to do, you know, and I think that helps us understand, appreciate art more when we understand it's not just this guy was a brilliant portraiture, you know, portraiture painter, but who was he painting? And who was he painting when he wasn't getting paid? You know, what kind of things was he saying or she saying in the writings or in the paintings or in the songs or in the music? But then, you know, as an artist, you have a deeper appreciation. And I think part of our job, those of us who enjoy teaching, is imparting that to younger people. Don't dismiss it. Don't throw it away. Give it a little time. Come back to it. What do you think?
When they find out, because I've noticed on several pages, really young people being into silent movies and all those things.
Yes.
Yes.
There was a lot being said in silent movies, wasn't there? A lot was going on. And it was, you know, the style of acting was very big. It had to be. But fascinating stuff. Some great stories that were being told in those really marvelous, you know, silent films that have survived. Really, yeah, it's a very good point. Yeah, going all the way back there.
I think it's more about allowing young people to find out as well, because when I grew up, there were still the old movies of the 20s and 30s were still repeated in the afternoon. You could watch them, and they put it away more and more. So it's far more difficult for people to find out history and things these days than it was then, which is strange with the internet.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I had way older than you, but having that similar thing that the old things were more available to us. Now you have to choose them.
Yes.
Now you have, the menu comes up, and what do you want to watch? Well, if you don't know any of those things, if they weren't like thrown in your face, you wouldn't know to choose them. So you don't, you choose. Having so much on the internet kind of narrows what we're doing with the internet, because we're only choosing the things we think we like.
True.
We're not really at school, at least, you have an assignment. Somebody says you have to watch this, you have to read this. Why? Because you have to, and then you experience it. But if no one says you have to do it, then you're not gonna, so I think it's an interesting, it would be very hard to be a teacher of young folks today. Very difficult, because they, they're on the phone. That's it. That's it. That's the answer to everything.
It's now you have the problem that there are pages that are teaching false history or just making up things to tell young people, and then you get all this confusion now.
Yes, and there's no way to double check it, because almost anything that's out there, somebody said that's what it is. That's true. We're so afraid, we're getting afraid to have an argument, and when I grew up, we had debate teams. People learned to take a side of some issue, and then they had to defend it, whether they believed in it or not. It was an exercise. You were always in the debate team. You were given things that you believed in, and then next week you had to debate something you didn't believe in. Well, why do I have to do that? Because you have to learn how to debate. And it teaches you how to have a conversation, even an energetic conversation. But it's okay if you disagree. Have the conversation and disagree. And as we say in the old days, agree to disagree, that's okay. I still like you, but you're wrong. Okay, you can be wrong. If you want to be wrong, you can be wrong, but I still like you, as opposed to, you don't believe in the same stuff I do, therefore you're evil. It's really difficult.
Yeah, because you can have, you can't, when you say one thing people don't agree with, it's just like, you get hundreds of people after you that suddenly don't like you anymore.
I know, isn't that scary?
Yes.
Yeah. You say one thing and all of a sudden, especially if you're looking to do anything on, work on the internet, if you happen to say something and then all of a sudden you're getting threats and
yes.
It's way different than, bullying in the old days was more like in person, and it was horrible, but at least it was limited. And now it's this noise that you don't even see the people. You just, you're reading their words, or you're reading their anger, and nothing you can do about it. Wow.
It's not just about big things. Even though I saw this actress who just said she didn't like a certain kind of cheese, who got threats about that.
I know. I don't know, Dannii. It's kind of nuts, but I've enjoyed talking with you. It's really fun. And I think that what you're doing is marvelous, kind of talking with people and, taking your own life and helping so many other people. I love your little mask behind there. That's a phantom mask, isn't it?
Yes.
So, well, so I thank you for this opportunity, because it's always fun, especially, and I'm very encouraged when I meet people like you who are young and who are out there and doing stuff, and you're doing important work.
Thank you. It's really great to talk to you, because, over the years I've listened to so much of your work and seen you, and it's great to talk about the people themselves.
Yeah, I think that's one gift that we get with this ability to, communicate as though we're in the same room and we're, continents apart. And I think that's wonderful. It has been very good to connect artists together, where in the old days we would have to go visit, which is fine, which is actually wonderful. But if you can't, to have this ability to do this stuff. I taught a course, or I taught a workshop. There's a marvelous university in Essen, Germany. And the gentleman comes over every couple of years and he brings his graduating musical theater class. And they're very good with English, so I teach them the psychological gesture of the Michael Chekhov work. And they put it either on their straight plays or on their music. And it is so much fun to work with students from another country, because as we were talking about the translations, I talk fast and I will have ideas and I will double explain it, whatever my idea is, with a reference that I understand. And they'll look at me like, and I go, oh, you don't get it. So then we'll start chatting about my explaining the reference, and then they will find another reference that they can use. But it all comes from a discussion, and we're all artists working for the same idea. And the stuff that I work with, that I teach, is very imaginative. And it's like not on a paper, it's in here and it's in here. And to see young folks who know that in their hearts, they know that their imagination is important, but to get that validated, to be told, yeah, no matter what they tell you, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. You got to do all those eventually, but you can do it your own way. How do you want to do it? You got to figure out what the character's doing now. You got to figure out what the character wants. You got to figure out what the character came from. But where do you want to sew those things together? Doesn't matter how you put it together, as long as you put it together. And good actors and people who are in the industry for a long time learn how to do this very fast. They all have their own way of working, and that they'll listen to the director, they'll work with the director, they'll work with other actors, but in their head and their heart, they're working in their own way. And that's exciting when you get a lot of good artists working together all differently. And they come together in the rehearsal period, and then they've created something wonderful together that they're presenting to the audience. So people who don't understand theater think that, you come together, you have the script, you have the director, they tell you exactly what to do. You work with the other actors and you come up with this idea. It's not the way it is at all. As soon as you get the audition, you're starting to work on the character, and then you have something all worked out. So it's like my experience with Maury, Yeston in Phantom. I knew how she, that character had been played before, and I saw something else. I honored what Maury Yeston had written, but he was always very open, with what, I have another idea. Oh, what is it? Tell me, show me, and then we both start working on it, and it becomes out something way more fun for the audience to watch and for the actor to do. So I don't know. That's why theater's fun.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity, for this wonderful conversation with you.
Yeah, it was great talking to you too. I love chatting about it. But anyway, so thank you. Keep doing the work you're doing, because that's very important too. Very important. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
It
Dannii.
was really great.
Okay, I'm glad I enjoyed you too. So keep doing it, girl.
Thank you.
Maybe we'll meet one day. Well, you can come to New York or I'll come there.
I hope so.
Okay, take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Behind the Mirror of Music with Dannii Cohen.